Hey everybody, Chris with Bear Outfitters here, and today we're going to be doing a little demo of a stove that I got sent by the folks over at APG Outdoors. It's essentially a jetboil knockoff, but I'm going to go through some of the details. Stick around and we'll do a quick boil test, and I'll show you just how fast this thing can go. So putting this thing on the scale, I'm coming out right at 546 grams. This thing, like I mentioned, is essentially a jetboil knockoff, a Chinese-made jetboil. It's going to be a little bit lower quality, but it has a lot of the same functions and a lot of the same performance as a name brand jetboil. So taking it out of the stuff sack, you can see it's got a branded coozy there. Handles pretty similar to other jetboil style. It's got the heat transfer fins in there. And then taking this off, you've got a pot, a lid, the jetboil style stand, a rig so that you can put this on top and use just the pot, and then the actual burner itself. So the main water boiling pot is big enough to do 3/4 of a liter. That's right at the very top of the rim. It does have the handy lid with the built-in strainer, which is really nice if you're doing ramen or doing something else that's kind of noodly and you want to be able to strain your stuff. Next up, using this attachment here, you can cook with the pot. It's essentially a pot rest. It's not super well fitted, which I'm going to list as one of my cons, but it's functional. One thing that I do really like is they send you the stand. That's one big weakness of a lot of these canister style stoves, is they depend on the canister for stability. Jetboil and a couple other manufacturers have stands like this. This is very much in the jetboil style, but it's included with the stove and the stove kit. It uses a standard isobutane canister, which you can find at pretty much any outfitter. This is a jetboil brand one. I've got some MSR ones floating around in the background there. The one thing that APG does mention is do not use the Coleman style, and that's actually something that I've been talking about with some other folks. Some people have had bad luck with certain stove types and the Coleman, the newer orange label canisters. I've never had an issue with any of my stoves, but just be aware that you can't use this stove with a Coleman style canister. So just like any other canister stove, you're going to go ahead and take it and screw it onto the Lindell valve there. I'll probably speed this up. This stove does have a piezo igniter, so that's what you're looking at right there. And it's similar to any other canister style stove. You're going to fold that out and you're going to open it up and light it. Okay, so I don't typically recommend lighting this type of stove indoors because of inefficient combustion. It can produce carbon monoxide. I've got the big shed door open back here, so I've got plenty of ventilation. I've got a couple of fans blowing this way, so don't think that I'm just lighting this indoors with no ventilation. Be sure that you're doing this outdoors or in a space with lots of ventilation and lots of air movement. So just as a quick boil test, I've got the big shed door open here, so I'm not going to get carbon monoxide poisoning. My water temperature right now is about 80 degrees. I'm going to light the stove up, boil it, see how long it takes. I'm going to stop the timer once it gets to 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the boiling point of water. Okay, so with my timer started, it's already climbing pretty quickly. I bet that this thing will boil water in probably a minute or close to it. So by my watch, it boiled water at just about a minute. Now it's at 212.5 Fahrenheit. Took about a minute to do it. Really quick boil time on this. And then just to show flame control here, I'm going to take the stove off. I'm going to show you how I light it. So you're just going to open this valve here on the side, piezo igniter. So this is at full bore pretty much right there. And I can take it down. Let's see how low I can get this. I can get it down pretty low before it starts to sputter on me a little bit. So I think that this will be good enough to simmer with. Because the pot is so small, I wouldn't do any really super complicated sauces or anything. But you should be able to get this pretty low. Even in a wind, I think you should be able to get this low enough that you can simmer on it. One thing that I do really like about this stove is it's got lots of thumb holds here. So even though the stove is still pretty hot, I can go ahead and start disassembling it. And because of the way that the feet are laid out, I can set this on a solid surface and not have to worry about it burning the surface. So looking at the APG stove, just for what it is, it's a jetboil style stove. It's about half the price of a jetboil off the shelf. It boils water at under a minute. It's got decent simmer control. Really, I think that this is a pretty decent stove. There's some things that I don't like about it, The biggest one is that when you're nesting the pot, the strainer, all of the components together, there's not quite enough space for you to fit the isobutane canister in there and nest everything together. That's my one big drawback. The second is the stuff sack that it comes with. I prefer a mesh stuff sack for my stoves, mostly because that way I can dry it out, hang it on a line in my camp or near where my bear bag is at, and I'm not worried about it. I can drip dry it, and I'm not worried about it being wet before I pack it up the next day. That said, that's a really minor thing. I can always pick up a second stuff sack somewhere else. So overall rating for the stove, size I think is going to be a 3 stars. It's still pretty bulky for what you get. And like I mentioned, you can't really nest the Jetboil canister or your isobutane canister in the stove set and it all fit and nest evenly. If the secondary pot that comes with it was a little bit taller, you'd be able to nest everything nicely together. For boil speed, I'm going to give it 5 stars. Really, that's on par with every other stove that I've tested that's in kind of this Jetboil or this jet rocket style stove. It's going to go ahead and do exactly what I need it to do, which is boil water quickly for things like dehydrated backpacking food. Price, I'm going to give it 4 stars. It comes in at about half of the MSRP of a Jetboil, which I think is really fair for what it is, and I think that it's going to be something that a lot of intro backpackers can get. Weight, I'm going to give it 2 stars. It is pretty heavy for what you're getting. You can get a BRS or an MSR stove that is going to be significantly lighter, that you can pair with a titanium pot, and it's going to get you a much lighter cook system for about the same cost. All in all, I think that the guys over at ADP have done a really good job with this stove. I think that it's going to be one that a lot of intro backpackers can use, and you can use if you want the Jetboil style but aren't willing to pay the Jetboil price tag. All in all, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars just because of the weight and the other issues that I mentioned previously. If this review has helped you and you have any comments or concerns or questions about this stove, please feel free to drop them in the comments, like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys out there next time. Until then, happy trails, everybody.